Do you think you can afford this? The words pierced the air louder than the soft classical music playing in the background. Amani Caldwell stood frozen, her fingers tracing the lace sleeve of the ivory gown, her breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment for as long as she could remember, but not like this. The boutique, Vera Madison Atelier, was a jewel nestled in the heart of Halcyon Hills, Colorado. It glowed under soft lighting, with pristine marble floors imported from Italy. The walls were adorned with exquisite wedding gowns, and the air was perfumed with a soft, floral fragrance that made every bride feel like royalty. Yet, to Amani, a young black woman from East Denver, it felt less like a dream and more like a distant fairy tale that she didn't belong to. She had fought for this moment, fought for every inch of happiness she was about to experience. She was marrying Elias Grant, a civil rights attorney who adored her mind, her spirit, her laughter. They had overcome obstacles together, weathered storms, and now they stood on the cusp of a new chapter in their lives. This day, this dress, it was supposed to symbolize the promise of a beautiful future. But now, standing in the reflection of the mirror, draped in the gown that felt like it was woven with her hopes and dreams, the weight of Evelyn Darson's words cut deep. The woman behind her, Evelyn, was a sharp-nosed, sharp-tongued senior stylist at Vera Madison Atelier. From the moment Amani had stepped through the door, Evelyn's demeanor had been clipped, her polite smiles a stark contrast to the coldness in her eyes. There had been no warm welcome, no congratulations, just an unspoken judgment that hung thick in the air. "I just want to see how it fits," Amani had said quietly, trying not to let the tension make her voice tremble. Evelyn had taken a long look at Amani's outfit. Simple jeans, worn sneakers, and a thrifted pea coat, and her expression hadn't hidden the disapproval. It was as if Amani's presence, there was somehow an affront to the boutique's image. But Amani had pressed on. She wasn't going to let anything ruin her day. Not even this. Now, as she stood before the grand mirror, she saw herself, a vision in silk and tulle, her reflection shimmering with the promise of a future she was ready to embrace. Yet Evelyn's voice cut through the moment. "I just think this particular design might be a bit ambitious," Evelyn said, stepping closer, her words dripping with condescension. "We have simpler options, ones that might suit your, budget better." Amani's heart sank, but she held her ground. "I didn't mention a budget," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of Evelyn's gaze. Evelyn's lips twisted into a tight smile. "Of course, dear, but sometimes it's good to be realistic. This gown, for instance, is custom couture, imported from Milan." Amani's pulse quickened. She wasn't naive. She understood exactly what Evelyn meant. She didn't belong in this space, not in this dress, not with her background. "I'm engaged to Elias Grant," she said finally, her voice stronger. "We can afford it." Evelyn blinked. Her lips twitched, but she said nothing. Instead, she glanced at the manager, who had been standing nearby, observing the exchange with an air of indifference. "Yes, well," Evelyn continued, her eyes narrowing, "we prefer to reserve certain dresses for clients who have established relationships with the brand." Amani's fingers tightened around the fabric of the dress. The weight of her words, the implications, hit her hard. "Excuse me?" she asked, struggling to process what was happening. Evelyn's eyes darted around the room, and she gave another tight-lipped smile. "I just don't think this particular design is the right fit for you," she said, her voice casual, almost dismissive. "It's nothing personal." But to Amani, it felt like everything personal. The room had fallen eerily silent. Other stylists, who had been busy with other customers, now watched them with quiet, nervous eyes. Amani felt their gazes on her, as if she were an intruder in a place where she didn't belong. It was as though the whole room was silently complicit in her humiliation. Turning towards the changing room, her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor. Her hand trembled as she grabbed her coat, ready to leave. But before she could escape, a new voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" A tall man in a slate-gray suit stood in the entrance. His expression was unreadable, but his presence shifted the air in the room. "Elias," He walked toward Amani with deliberate steps, his gaze moving between her and Evelyn, then to the manager, whose arms were crossed tightly over her chest. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the manager said, her voice cool. But her words were not directed at Evelyn. They were for Amani. "We reserve the right to refuse service. We have a certain image to uphold." Amani's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she found the strength to stand her ground. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice breaking as the weight of the moment crashed down on her. "I'm afraid we are," the manager replied, her tone final. Amani felt herself being ushered toward the door, the entire situation unfolding in slow motion. She could feel the stares on her back, each one more uncomfortable than the last. Her hand shook as she reached for her coat. And then Elias stepped forward, blocking the manager's path. "You've made a mistake," he said, his voice calm but laced with authority. "A big one." He pulled out his phone, his jaw set with determination. "I'm calling to acquire this boutique," Elias continued, his voice unwavering. "Buy them out, today. The building, the staff, everything. And make it public." Amani's breath hitched. "Elias, don't." But he was already dialing. He didn't flinch. "It's not just a dress, Amani," he said, turning to her with fiery intensity in his eyes. "It's your dignity. And no one gets to take that from you." Outside, snow began to fall softly, as if the world was holding its breath. Inside, however, something far more powerful was taking shape that Amani's heart swelled. The battle was far from over, but Elias's words sparked something deep inside her. The fight for her dignity wasn't just about this dress. It was about standing up, about taking her place in a world that wasn't always kind to people like her. And she was ready. This was her story, and it was only just beginning. Amani and Elias walked down the street, Isabella West's voice trailing behind them like a constant reminder of the support they now had. With every step, Amani felt stronger, no longer just battling for herself, but for the chance to see something good come from this awful day. But she knew there would be many more obstacles ahead. Isabella kept pace with them, her heels clicking confidently on the pavement, but this time it didn't feel like she was following them. It felt like she was walking with them, supporting them. Amani could feel her presence beside her, offering strength and reassurance when she needed it most. "What do you think we should do now?" Elias asked, his voice softer now, the tension of the boutique beginning to fade. There was still a trace of concern in his eyes, but it was replaced with the quiet strength that Amani knew he always had. Amani looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "We have to find our own path, a new way forward. We can't let this define us. It's not just about the dress. It's about accepting who we are, about showing the world who we really are." Elias smiled gently, squeezing her hand. "And I'll be with you every step of the way. You deserve the world, Amani. We'll make sure the world sees you for who you truly are." Isabella, walking confidently behind them, nodded in agreement. She wasn't just a stranger. They were a team now. Amani felt the weight of the world beginning to lift from her shoulders. She realized that this moment wasn't just about a dress or a boutique. It was about fighting for the truth and her place in a world that hadn't always welcomed her. "You're right," Amani said quietly. "It's not just about the dress. It's about us. It's about standing up for who we are and never letting anyone make us feel small." Elias leaned in, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity she had always loved. "We'll do it together, no matter what." With Isabella beside them, they began to walk down the street again. But this time it felt different. The world seemed a little less cold, a little less judgmental. They had each other, and that was all they needed. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth," Isabella said, her voice steady and firm. "This is just the beginning, Amani. I'm going to make sure that boutique and the people who run it face the consequences of their actions. No one should be treated the way you were today." Amani smiled, grateful for the unexpected ally at her side. "Thank you, Isabella, for everything." Isabella's smile was sharp, full of purpose. "Don't thank me yet. We're just getting started." Amani glanced at Elias, who gave her a reassuring smile. They were no longer just two people facing a world that seemed indifferent. They were a team, fighting not just for a future together, but for respect, for dignity, and for the right to be seen as they truly were. They continued down the street, but the world around them seemed to shift. The people they passed no longer seemed so distant, the air less heavy with judgment. Amani no longer felt like an outsider. She was someone worthy of attention, of respect, someone who deserved to be seen. The trio made their way to another store, one that felt warmer, more welcoming. The contrast with the boutique was stark, and for a moment, Amani felt the weight of the past few hours lift off her shoulders. The encounter with the boutique had been difficult, but it had sparked something inside her, a fire, a resolve that couldn't be extinguished. Isabella spoke up again, breaking the comfortable silence. We need to make sure we bring attention to this. What happened today isn't just about you, Amani. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Amani nodded. I know, and I'm not going to let it go unnoticed. Elias, walking beside her, squeezed her hand again, a silent promise of solidarity. We'll fight for this, Amani. We'll make sure your voice is heard. As they stepped into the next door, Amani couldn't help but feel a growing sense of empowerment. She was no longer just a woman seeking a dress. She was a woman standing up for herself, for all the women who had ever been made to feel less than they were. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was here, and she mattered. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. And this time, Amani was ready to fight. With Elias by her side and Isabella's unwavering support, Amani knew she could face whatever came next, and the world would see her, not just as a bride, but as a woman of strength, dignity, and courage.